Chris Yulman reporting. Last night, State Parliament voted to change civil union laws introduced under the previous Labor government. They'll now be called registered relationships, and the state will no longer sanction ceremonies. But during a fast-tracked and fiery debate on the amendments last night, the Attorney-General dropped another bombshell. The LNP also plans to stop same-sex couples from using a surrogate mother to have children. Single people and de facto couples of less than 2 years will also be banned. To discuss the week in Parliament, I was joined in the studio by the Deputy Premier, Jeff Seeney, and the Opposition Leader, Annastacia Palaszczuk, a little earlier. Mr Seeney, can I start with you? Why does the LNP want to restrict surrogacy to only heterosexual couples?
Well, I think the LNP's had a clear policy position on this for some time. When the original legislation was introduced, we sought to have it amended then. So I don't think it should come as any surprise to anybody that now that the LNP's attained government with such a big mandate, that we would seek to align our policy position with the law.
Except it is a surprise in that Campbell Newman was asked about it and said that there were no plans to change that law.
Well, I think when he was asked, he did say a number of times that this wasn't a priority. We were focused on the big issues. We were focused on fixing Labor's failures, and that remains. We are focused on fixing Labor's failures. We're focused on fixing the health system, focused on reforming the planning schemes. We're focused on building the economy, and they're the things we want to talk about. But the Attorney-General indicated last night that we would be moving, as it shouldn't surprise anybody, we would be moving to ensure that our policy was implemented in this particular area.
But it wasn't taken to the election.
Oh, it was clearly our policy for a long time. I don't think it would come.
Which Campbell Newman said were all null and void when he took over as LNP leader.
I don't think it would come as any surprise to anybody that's followed Queensland politics for any time at all to know that this was our policy.
Does it come as a surprise to you, Ms Palaszczuk?
Of course, it comes as a complete surprise, and we heard about this last night at about 10 o'clock in the Queensland Parliament. This is an unacceptable way to hear about this. Campbell Newman, before the election, never said that he was going to be winding back the surrogacy laws in Queensland. We've come a long way in Queensland over 20 years, and by doing this, we are winding back the clock.
So the opposition wouldn't be supporting these amendments in the Parliament?
Not at all. And let's make it very clear, this is not just about surrogacy for same-sex couples. This is about surrogacy for singles and also for de factos who may be in a relationship for less than 2 years. So, for example, if you're a single woman and you've lost your husband, under the new LNP government, you will not be able to access surrogacy services.
Will Labor MPs be given a conscience vote?
Absolutely. As they were given in the civil unions debate last night as well, a conscience vote.
Did Campbell Newman get rolled in the party room? Because again, he said during the election campaign that those laws would not be changed.
He also said a number of times in that interview, if you read the entire transcript, that these things weren't our main priority, that we were focusing on the big issues that affect Queensland, and there's an enormous number of big issues that are affecting Queensland at the moment, and that's what we're focused on. The Attorney-General made this comment in the Parliament last night. It is a reflection of the view in the party room.
So the party room has been consulted?
The party room certainly talked about it as part of the debate, about the civil relationships. It's mixed up in that debate in a lot of people's minds, so it was talked about. But it's not an issue. It's not a top of mind issue for us. We're more focused on the $100 billion worth of debt. We're more focused. No, they are the things that our government is focused on.
But aren't we only? This is the fourth week of Parliament. We've only had 4 sitting weeks of Parliament. And for these issues that you say were not a priority for the LNP, and they've already been introduced and passed with civil unions, and you've flagged changes to the surrogacy laws. So for something that's not a priority, and for it to already be in the Parliament, that's pretty quick, isn't it?
That's right. Especially it was important to deal with the civil unions legislation so that we can focus on these big issues. The fact that we're talking about it today reinforces the point. We should be talking about the $100 billion worth of debt that Labor have left us. We should be talking about developing our economy, building our coal ports, protecting the barrier reef. We should be talking about reforming the housing system, reforming the planning system. But instead, we're talking about these issues which are not a priority for us. Our priority is improving the cost of living for Queenslanders, doing something about the water prices and the electricity prices, those things that are important to Queensland families.
Ms Palaszczuk?
Jess, how can they say it's not a priority when they are discussing these issues in the Parliament? What I think the LNP government is scared of is that they actually have a party conference coming up, and we know that there are huge divisions between the Liberals and between the Nationals, and that's why they're rushing this legislation through the Parliament. These issues affect people, and this is where I think that the government is not being compassionate and they are being mean and tricky. These are issues that affect so many people in our community, and to rush these through without going to the committee where people can express their views is not the way a government should conduct themselves.
The changes that were made to the civil unions legislation last night and passed in the Parliament, Ms Palaszczuk, you voted against them in the Parliament last night, but do you accept that the LNP has a mandate to do that?
Not really, Jess. Basically what we saw from the LNP was a compromise because they couldn't agree. Before the election they were talking about repealing, so I'm very pleased that they didn't repeal it. But they've actually changed the name, which changes the nature of the Act. But not only that, they've taken out the ceremony, the state-sanctioned ceremony. And who are we to judge people who are in a loving, committed relationship, who want to stand up in front of their family and their friends and make a long-term commitment to one another? Once again, the LNP is doing diversion tactics here when the real issue is 55,000, up to 55,000 people could be losing their jobs in Queensland. And the government refuses to say what jobs are staying and what jobs are going. It's no laughing matter,
No, that's
Jeff,
what we want to talk about.
Because
that's
you are
the point.
actually
You're
actually dealing with people and families and their livelihoods. And there's a cloud of uncertainty over this state, and there's only one person to blame for that, and that is your government and the Premier.
Well, let's talk about jobs then, which you both seem to agree
They're the
is
big issues.
the big issue.
That's right.
Unions were up in arms not only over job losses, but teachers marched on Parliament this week to demand a better pay deal than the one that they've been offered. So let's just take a look at that.
QTU! 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 QTU!
A 2.7% increase is one that is considered, generous, and is a reflection of their value in our education system.
Are you feeling valued? No! Within the Education Department there are 6,598 teachers, 2,746 teacher aides, 192 grounds people and 148 cleaners, and they are all on temporary contracts. Will the Premier guarantee that all these education positions will be quarantined from the LNP's jobs purge?
I cannot give any guarantees. I made that very clear. And those people that you feign some concern for today, their temporary contract positions are a direct result of your decisions when you were in Cabinet. Labor have employed 20,000 more public servants than the people of Queensland can currently afford. Those 20,000 public servants all have families to look after, they have mouths to feed, and we're going to fight as hard as we can to save those jobs.
We're getting a little tired of the demonisation of the public service. These are proud Queenslanders, many of whom would have voted for Campbell Newman.
Ms Palaszczuk, is it Labor's fault that public servants are now in this position of the risk of losing their jobs?
No, there are many people who are on temporary contracts and who are casuals, and we now know through a question we put to the government that there are some 55,000 people in this category. The government needs to say, are these jobs staying or going? And by the indications from the Premier, these jobs are going. But let's be very clear that the previous government did not sack these workers. They had employment.
The previous government did put them on temporary contracts though, didn't they? And the public service did balloon under the previous government.
Well, we saw today 4.3 million people are now living in Queensland. We had 1,500 people a week coming to Queensland. If we did not build the infrastructure, if we did not put more money into hospitals and schools and increase the size of the public service, we would have been criticised for not actually growing our state. And that's exactly what Labor did.
Mr Seeney, has the LNP's promise of no forced redundancies been abandoned?
No, we haven't had any forced redundancies. What we've done is to try and deal with this huge number of temporary people that the former Labor government employed. Between 2006 and 2008, the public service expanded by 40% in 2 years. Most of them were these temporary appointments that we now have to deal with because there's no money to pay them. The Labor government employed these people with no money to pay them. They paid paid them by accumulating debt. That debt is going to reach $100 billion. We cannot sustain it.
Does the promise stand, and will it continue that there will be no forced redundancies?
Well, we're desperately trying to deal with the situation that's been left to us. What we have to deal with is the temporary workforce that was employed at the same time as dealing with the demands for extra pay. Every time we increase the pay levels, it means more of those people's jobs are under threat. Now we have to deal with that as best we can in the financial situation that will see Queensland with $100 billion worth of debt.
Mr Seeney, Ms Palaszczuk, we are out of time, but perhaps no one was as quite out of time this week as the member for Bundamba.